The Naismith Basketball Hall of Fame has announced its eligible candidates for the class of 2025. The headliners for the men are Carmelo Anthony, Dwight Howard, Marc Gasol, and for the coaching side, Doc Rivers and Billy Donovan. Now, I've looked through the list. One of the names that stands out to me is Robert Horry. He's actually on the list of candidates who could possibly get in there. Now, when I look at Robert Horry's career, it's interesting. When he first got drafted to the Rockets, he was a lottery prospect. He showed a lot of potential. For some of you guys who probably don't remember this or were too young to see this, but Robert Horry actually started off his career at the small forward spot. He was a 6'9", 6'10", super athletic guy who could play the three. He was able to guard threes during his young age at that time. He had the speed and the quickness, the lateral quickness to defend the three spot, and he was very mobile. He could jump pretty high, so he had the hops. That's one thing Robert Horry had. And what's even more interesting, to start off his career, he was not a good shooter. What forced him to be a good shooter was George Karl made a gamble in the 93 playoffs when Robert was a rookie to leave him open simply because he felt Robert couldn't hit jump shots, and George Karl was proven right. Horry mentions this years later that playoff series forced him to work on his jump shot to improve. So that could never happen again. Or he felt that if he could have hit those shots in that Seattle series, the Rockets could have won that series. So that played a huge role in his development. But what I found really interesting about Horry was that he was always this weird type of player throughout his career that during the first half of his career, when he was in, I would say, the Rocket years, when he played for Houston, that he looked like he could be an all-star type of player. He was super athletic, the way he moved up and down the court, that people thought eventually he was going to get there. I remember even during the 95 playoffs, he had some big moments, and the media was thinking back then, like, wow, this guy looks like he's going to be on the verge, that he's going to one day be a really, really good player. But that never really happened for him. I just feel that Robert just didn't have the mentality, despite having the tools to be a really good player, but not the mindset to be a good player. He had like a slacker's mentality in the sense that that he didn't always try his hardest during the regular season. Just he would put up, just a mediocre numbers, nothing special. And then during the playoffs, that always tended to be the case. He would then have these breakout games that would come in a series, like during the championship runs. I feel for any of the teams that already played on, you would always get these one or two games during every playoff series in which he looked like an all-star player. Like he could just turn on that switch, and it was a huge game changer because teams couldn't plan for it. But he wasn't consistent. Just he would have one of those two games, and then he would look like trash again for like the rest of that series. And occasionally have that moment where he hits a game-winning shot. That was always his MO from what I remember it. But he just didn't have the mentality to be a good player all the time. He could just do it once in a while. It was kind of like the cheat code that he would have it in him, but he just couldn't be consistent like that or even come close to being consistent. He had his chance when he was traded to Phoenix, and it really proved that he could not be a great player because Phoenix wanted him to be great, and he just didn't have it in him to be great. He struggled there. He had a terrible season, and he looked like he was pretty much done. That's how bad he looked for the Suns. The Lakers took a gamble by trading for him. They gave up Cedric Sabalas, thinking that they could resurrect his career and that he was able, and the fact was he was able to win championships with a great big man Hakeem. They thought he would be a great complement to Shaq. So that's why they traded for him back then. Obviously, it worked out great for them. He was crucial in their championship runs by hitting clutch shots, having some big games during the playoffs. His most notable moment with the Lakers was that game-winning shot against the Sacramento Kings, which was in Game 4 of the Western Conference Finals back in 2002, where he hit that three-point shot at the top of the key against a tap out by Vlade Divac. I think it was a miss by Shaq where the ball tipped to him, and it worked out for him. So that was the most notable shot he's hit in his career. I think that's the shot people remember the most. when they think about him. He's had other game-winning shots, like in San Antonio, where he hit the game-winning shot in Game 5 of the NBA Finals against the Detroit Pistons, which was a huge shot because if he didn't hit that shot, the Spurs would have lost that series. So that was big. And he's also had that big shot he hit in Game 1 of the 95 Western Conference Finals against the Spurs, which was a game-winning shot, which he hit, which was a mid-range shot at the top of the key. So those are the most memorable shots. And he was very great in these clutch moments. But I just don't think that's good enough in my eyes to make him a Hall of Famer. I just don't see it. Just you can't reward just being great in certain moments when it comes to getting a Hall of Fame. I think the Hall of Fame is a reflection of being great all the time, not just a select few moments. To me, Robert Horry was kind of like the basketball version of a slacker, a guy who would just not do the work all year and then just suddenly turn it up for like finals and was able to pass the class barely on the margins. That's really who Horry was as a basketball player. And that to me is just not greatness. And you look at his numbers overall, they're just not great. 7 points is his career average. 4.8 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 1 steal. I just don't see a Hall of Famer. I know some people will say like, well, the teams that he was on, they wouldn't have won the titles without his heroic plays during the playoffs. That's very true, but that doesn't make him a Hall of Famer. You could say that about plenty of championship teams. If you take away a key role player, that they wouldn't have won the titles that they won. That is very true, but that doesn't mean that they should be a Hall of Famer. It doesn't make them a Hall of Famer in my eyes. So I don't think he deserves to get in there. If you include him in there, then you set a precedent for these other role players to get in. Who's to say that Bruce Bowen doesn't deserve to get in there, or Horace Grant doesn't deserve to get in there, or Bill Cartwright doesn't deserve to get in there? Because I don't think the Bulls win their first three-peat without Bill Cartwright. He was very crucial. They needed him, even though he was a role player. You see how this argument goes? I just don't think that that role players should be included in the Hall of Fame. So that's how I feel. He had a great career as a role player, quote unquote, and he's just not a Hall of Famer. That's just the way I look at it.